The morning sun filtered through the Venetian blinds of the Portland Police Department's K-9 unit office, casting striped shadows across Detective Sarah Martinez's cluttered desk. She sat hunched over her third cup of coffee, staring at a manila folder she'd been avoiding for the past hour. Bailey, her 5-year-old German shepherd, lay at her feet, chin resting on massive paws, those intelligent brown eyes tracking every minute shift in Sarah's posture. Bailey wasn't your typical police dog. She wore no badge, chased no criminals, and had never sniffed out a single bag of contraband. Instead, she possessed something far more extraordinary, an almost supernatural ability to sense human pain, particularly in children. Where other dogs detected drugs or explosives, Bailey detected broken spirits. Sarah reached down absently, her fingers finding the soft spot behind Bailey's ear. The dog leaned into the touch, releasing a contented sigh that seemed to ease some of the tension coiling in Sarah's chest. They'd been partners for 5 years now, ever since Bailey graduated from the specialized courthouse facility dog training program in Seattle. Together, they'd walked 32 traumatized children through the nightmare of testifying in court. 32 small voices found because of one remarkable dog. "But this one's different, girl," Sarah whispered, finally opening the folder. The photograph paperclip to the first page made her breath catch. Emma Richardson stared back at her, or rather through her, with eyes that looked far too old for a 3-year-old face. In the photo, taken just 2 weeks ago during a preliminary interview, the little girl sat rigid in her mother's lap, blonde curls framing a face that held no expression whatsoever. No curiosity, no fear, no joy, just absence. Sarah had seen that look before, in soldiers returning from war zones, in abuse survivors, in people who'd witnessed horrors that shattered something fundamental inside them. But never in someone so young, never in a toddler who should be worried about lost toys and bedtime stories, not violent crimes and courtroom testimony. Bailey suddenly lifted her head, ears pricked forward. She rose to her feet and padded over to press her nose against Sarah's knee, a gesture that meant "I feel your stress, and I'm here." Sarah smiled despite the heaviness in her chest. "Yeah, you always know, don't you?" The case file told a story that made Sarah's blood boil. 6 months ago, Emma had been playing in her bedroom on a warm August evening. Her window overlooked the quiet residential street where she'd learned to ride her tricycle, where neighbors waved and knew each other's names. That night, she'd heard shouting and looked outside at exactly the wrong moment. Or maybe the right moment, depending on how you looked at it. Emma witnessed Marcus Thompson, a 34-year-old man with a history of violence, brutally assault his girlfriend in the middle of the street. The attack was savage, fists, kicks, and a cracked baseball bat. The girlfriend, Lisa Chen, survived but with permanent injuries. And 3-year-old Emma Richardson, watching from her second-floor window, had stopped speaking the instant the first blow landed. Complete selective mutism, the psychologists called it, trauma-induced. The part of Emma's brain that controlled speech had simply shut down, a defense mechanism, her mind's way of protecting itself from processing what her eyes had seen. Sarah flipped through page after page of specialist reports. Speech therapist, no progress after 12 sessions. Child psychologist, patient remains nonverbal, resistant to play therapy techniques. Trauma counselor, severe dissociative symptoms. Prognosis uncertain. The district attorney's note clipped to the back of the file was blunt: "We need her testimony. Thompson's girlfriend is too scared to testify. He's threatened her family. Without Emma, he walks. Can Bailey help?" Can Bailey help? Sarah looked down at her partner, who'd returned to her spot by the desk but kept those watchful eyes on Sarah's face. Could one dog, no matter how gifted, reach a child that a dozen trained professionals couldn't? Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from her supervisor: "Richardson family coming in at 2 p.m. Conference room B, you and Bailey only. Keep it low pressure." She checked her watch. 11:47 a.m., 2 hours and 13 minutes. "Well, girl," Sarah said, standing and stretching. "Looks like we're about to find out if your magic works on the hardest case yet." Bailey's tail swished once across the floor, not the happy helicopter wag of excitement, but the slow, deliberate movement that Sarah had learned meant the dog was shifting into work mode. Somehow, Bailey always knew when they were about to meet a child who needed her. Sarah spent the next 2 hours preparing. She moved furniture in Conference Room B, creating an open, non-threatening space. She brought in Emma's favorite things based on the mother's intake form: coloring books, stuffed animals, juice boxes. She dimmed the harsh fluorescent lights and opened the blinds to let in natural sunlight. She placed soft blankets on the floor where Bailey could lie down without seeming intimidating. Every detail mattered. Children like Emma didn't need another sterile, scary official space. They needed somewhere that felt safe enough to begin healing. At 1:58 p.m., Sarah heard footsteps in the hallway. Her heart rate kicked up. Bailey, who'd been lying peacefully on one of the blankets, opened her eyes but didn't rise. Smart dog, she knew better than to make sudden movements around traumatized children. The door opened. Jennifer Richardson entered first, and Sarah's heart broke all over again. The woman looked like she'd aged a decade in 6 months, dark circles under her eyes, shoulders slumped with the weight of watching her baby suffer. And then came Emma. The little girl walked with mechanical steps, holding her mother's hand but looking at nothing. She wore a yellow sundress with daisies on it, and her blonde hair was pulled into 2 careful pigtails. Someone had tried very hard to make her look like a normal, happy 3-year-old. But Emma's eyes told the truth. They were empty, haunted, gone. Sarah's throat tightened. This was the child who needed to somehow find her voice, stand in a courtroom, and identify a violent criminal. This tiny, broken little soul was their only hope for justice. She glanced at Bailey, who hadn't moved from her spot on the blanket, but whose eyes had locked onto Emma with laser focus. Please, Sarah thought, if ever your gift was real, let it work now. Emma's future, and maybe her voice, depended on what happened next. 6 months earlier, August 15, 2023. Emma Richardson was singing. Her mother, Jennifer, could hear the off-key rendition of "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" drifting down the hallway from Emma's bedroom, and despite the exhaustion of a long workday, she smiled. Her daughter had the enthusiasm of a Broadway performer and the pitch accuracy of a car alarm, but Jennifer wouldn't trade those precious, chaotic songs for anything in the world. "Emma, baby, 5 more minutes and then bath time," Jennifer called from the kitchen, where she was heating up leftover pasta. "Okay, Mama," the little voice chirped back, followed by more singing and the sound of toy trucks being crashed together. It was a perfectly ordinary Tuesday evening in their quiet Portland neighborhood. The kind of evening where nothing remarkable was supposed to happen, where the biggest decision was whether Emma would choose the mermaid pajamas or the unicorn ones, where life felt safe, predictable, and beautifully mundane. Jennifer had no idea that in exactly 12 minutes, everything would shatter. Emma stood at her bedroom window, pressing her nose against the glass. At 3 years old, she was endlessly curious about the world outside. Her room overlooked Maple Street, a tree-lined avenue where neighbors walked their dogs and kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on. Emma loved watching the world from her perch, narrating everything she saw in her own unique way. "Mama, Mrs. Chen is walking," Emma had shouted earlier when she spotted their neighbor. "That's nice, sweetie," Jennifer had responded, used to Emma's running commentary. Now, as the summer sun dipped below the roofline, casting long shadows across the street, Emma spotted something that made her pause her singing. A man and a woman were standing by a blue car. The man was talking very loud, so loud Emma could hear the angry sounds even through her closed window. She recognized the woman. It was Ms. Lisa, the pretty lady who sometimes gave Emma lollipops when they met at the grocery store. Ms. Lisa had a nice smile and painted fingernails that sparkled. But Ms. Lisa wasn't smiling now. Emma tilted her head, confused. The man was grabbing Ms. Lisa's arm, and Ms. Lisa was trying to pull away. Even at 3, Emma understood body language. Ms. Lisa was scared. Emma's tummy felt funny, the same way it felt when she watched the scary part of movies, right before Mama fast-forwarded. "Mama," Emma called out, but Jennifer was running water in the kitchen and didn't hear. What happened next occurred in slow motion and lightning speed simultaneously. The man, Emma would later learn his name was Marcus Thompson, shoved Lisa Chen hard against the car. The sound of her body hitting metal carried up to Emma's window. Then came the first punch. Emma's small hands gripped the windowsill. Her blue eyes went wide. This wasn't like the cartoon fights on TV where characters bounce back up. This was real. The sounds were real. Ms. Lisa's scream was real. Marcus Thompson hit Lisa Chen again. And again. She fell to the ground and he kicked her. Emma watched him pick up something from the ground. Later, police would identify it as a wooden baseball bat he'd been carrying in his trunk. "Mama," Emma's voice came out as a squeak. Her legs felt frozen. She couldn't look away. The bat came down on Lisa's shoulder, then her back. Lisa was curling into a ball trying to protect herself, and Emma's 3-year-old brain couldn't process what she was seeing. This was Ms. Lisa. Nice Ms. Lisa who gave her lollipops. Why was the bad man hurting her? Marcus Thompson looked up suddenly, perhaps sensing he was being watched. For one eternal second his eyes met Emma's through the second-floor window. His face was twisted with rage, and even from that distance, even through glass, Emma felt the impact of that stare. It was a look of pure violence, of threat, of danger. That's when something inside Emma broke. "Mama!" This time, the scream tore from Emma's throat with such terror that Jennifer dropped the pasta spoon and ran. By the time Jennifer burst into Emma's room, the little girl had collapsed on the floor beneath the window, sobbing in huge, gasping breaths. Jennifer scooped her up, feeling her daughter's heart hammering like a hummingbird's. "Baby, what happened? What's wrong?" Emma opened her mouth, but no words came out. She pointed frantically at the window. Jennifer, still holding her daughter, looked outside and felt her own blood run cold. Lisa Chen lay motionless on the pavement. Marcus Thompson was getting into his car. And in the distance, someone was already calling 911, their shouts carrying through the evening air. "Oh my God," Jennifer whispered. She carried Emma away from the window, but the damage was done. The image was seared into the little girl's mind. As Jennifer fumbled for her phone to call police, as sirens began wailing in the distance, as neighbors ran outside, Emma sat on her mother's hip in complete silence. She didn't cry anymore, didn't speak, didn't make a sound. The police came within minutes. An ambulance rushed Lisa Chen to the hospital. She'd survive, but with a fractured skull, broken ribs, and injuries that would leave permanent scars. Officers swarmed the neighborhood, taking statements. And when they learned that 3-year-old Emma Richardson had witnessed everything from her bedroom window, they knew they had their star witness. Except Emma wasn't talking. "Sweetie, can you tell the nice officer what you saw?" Jennifer pleaded that first night, still not understanding the depth of the trauma. Emma stared at the wall, her mouth firmly closed. Days turned into weeks. Specialists were called in. Dr. Patricia Howland, a renowned child psychologist, spent 6 sessions trying every technique in her arsenal. Play therapy, art therapy, sand tray therapy. Nothing worked. "She's locked the memory away," Dr. Howland finally told Jennifer during a devastating consultation. "Her brain is protecting her from processing what she witnessed. The trauma was too severe, too violent for her developmental stage to handle. Speaking requires accessing those memories, and right now, Emma's psyche won't allow that." "Will she ever talk again?" Jennifer asked, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Howland's pause spoke volumes. "I don't know." Meanwhile, Marcus Thompson sat in jail, confident. His public defender had reviewed the evidence. one nonverbal 3-year-old witness, and a victim too terrified to testify after Thompson's associates made threats against her elderly parents. Without testimony, the case was circumstantial at best. Thompson would walk free in months unless Emma could speak. But Emma Richardson, who once sang off-key songs and narrated the world with toddler enthusiasm, remained silent. Her voice had been stolen by violence, locked away behind walls of trauma that seemed impenetrable. The justice system needed a miracle. They needed someone who could reach a child that human experts couldn't. They needed Bailey, 4 weeks, 28 days. That's all the time Detective Sarah Martinez and Bailey had to accomplish what a dozen specialists couldn't: help Emma Richardson find her voice again. The trial date was set for September 20th, and District Attorney Michael Chen, no relation to the victim, had made it painfully clear. Without Emma's testimony, Marcus Thompson would walk free on a technicality. "No pressure," Sarah muttered to Bailey as they prepared for their first official session with Emma. The German Shepherd tilted her head, sensing the anxiety in her partner's voice. The protocol for courthouse facility dog interventions was clear: never rush, never force, never demand. Let the child lead. Let trust build naturally. But protocol didn't account for ticking clocks and desperate prosecutors and a violent man who might go free. Sarah pushed those thoughts aside. Bailey needed her to be calm. Emma needed her to be patient. Justice could wait for healing, it had to. Day 1, the introduction. Emma arrived at the station's family interview room clinging to her mother like a baby koala. Jennifer Richardson looked exhausted, her hope worn thin by 6 months of silence. Sarah had transformed the sterile space into something softer: pillows on the floor, warm lighting, toys scattered naturally around the room. Bailey lay on a thick blue blanket in the corner, the picture of relaxation. She'd been trained for this: be present, be calm, make no demands. Let the child come to you or don't. Either way, you're safe. "Hi, Emma," Sarah said softly, crouching to the little girl's level but maintaining distance. "That's my friend Bailey over there. She's very gentle and she loves to nap. We're just going to hang out for a while, okay? You don't have to do anything you don't want to." Emma's face remained expressionless, but her eyes flicked toward Bailey for a fraction of a second. It was the first sign of interest Sarah had seen in the file photos. A spark. Tiny, but there. For 37 minutes, nothing happened. Jennifer sat in a chair with Emma on her lap. Sarah worked quietly at a small table, filling out paperwork and pretending not to watch. Bailey dozed, occasionally shifting position, her breathing deep and rhythmic. Then, at minute 38, Emma's body relaxed slightly. The rigid tension in her small shoulders eased by perhaps a millimeter. Sarah caught it. So did Bailey, whose ear twitched though she didn't open her eyes. When the session ended, Emma hadn't moved closer to Bailey, hadn't made a sound, hadn't shown any obvious progress. But Sarah saw what others might miss. Emma had looked at Bailey 7 times. 7 moments of connection. It was enough for day 1. Week 1, the approach. By the 3rd session, Emma had graduated from her mother's lap to sitting on the floor, still across the room from Bailey but closer. Progress measured in feet and inches. Sarah brought different activities each time: bubbles, kinetic sand, building blocks, never pressuring Emma to engage but making them available. Bailey remained her constant self, present, peaceful, undemanding. On the 5th session, something shifted. Sarah was blowing bubbles and one floated over to land on Bailey's nose. The dog's eyes opened, crossed slightly as she tried to see the bubble, and then she sneezed, a huge, dramatic sneeze that made the bubble explode. Emma's lips twitched, not quite a smile but close, so close. Sarah's heart soared, but she kept her reaction minimal. "Bailey's not a fan of bubbles in her nose," she said conversationally. Emma's hand moved, reaching forward slightly, though she pulled it back. But Bailey had seen. The dog's tail swished once against the blanket. An invitation. "I'm here when you're ready." Week 2, the touch. Session 8 brought the breakthrough Sarah had been waiting for. Emma entered the room and, instead of sitting far away, positioned herself just 3 feet from Bailey's blanket. Jennifer shot Sarah a look of cautious hope. Sarah read a picture book aloud, her voice soft and rhythmic. Bailey dozed. Emma watched the dog with increasing focus, studying the rise and fall of Bailey's breathing, the twitch of her ears, the gentle movement of her paws during whatever dream she was having. 20 minutes into the session, Emma's hand crept forward. Inch by inch, her fingers trembled as they extended toward Bailey's fur. Sarah held her breath, forcing herself not to react, not to encourage, not to do anything that might break the spell. Emma's fingertips touched Bailey's back, barely, lighter than a feather. Bailey's eyes opened slowly. She didn't move her head, didn't shift her body. She simply looked at Emma with those deep, understanding brown eyes and continued breathing calmly. Emma kept her hand there for exactly 4 seconds before pulling back, but something had changed. A wall had been scaled, even if it was just the first of many. "Good job being so gentle," Sarah said quietly. "Bailey really likes soft touches." Emma nodded, an actual nod, communication, non-verbal but real. Week 3, the connection. By the 3rd week, Emma sat directly beside Bailey for entire sessions. Her hand rested in the dog's thick fur, her small fingers occasionally stroking, occasionally just holding on like Bailey was an anchor keeping her tethered to safety. Sarah introduced gentle questions during these sessions, never about the assault, just normal things. "Do you like pizza, Emma? What's your favorite color?" Emma never answered verbally, but she began responding with nods and head shakes. It was during session 14 that the most remarkable moment occurred. Sarah had been reading Where the Wild Things Are when Emma suddenly shifted. She lay down on the blanket beside Bailey, pressing her small body against the dog's warm side. Bailey immediately adjusted, curling slightly to create a protective cocoon around the little girl. Emma's eyes closed. For the first time in 6 months, according to Jennifer's tearful whisper, Emma looked peaceful. Actually peaceful, not just shut down. They stayed like that for 40 minutes. Sarah kept reading, her voice barely above a whisper. Jennifer cried silently in her chair, and Bailey, remarkable, intuitive Bailey, seemed to understand the profound importance of simply being present. Week 4, the question. With only 3 days until trial, Sarah knew she had to push, even though every instinct screamed against it. They'd built trust. Emma was clearly bonded to Bailey, but would that be enough to unlock her voice? During their 20th session, Sarah made her move. Emma was lying against Bailey as usual, drawing pictures with crayons. Sarah sat nearby, keeping her tone casual. "Emma, I know something scary happened, something that hurt Ms. Lisa." She paused, watching the little girl's hand still on the paper. "You saw it, didn't you?" Emma's entire body tensed. Bailey felt it and lifted her head, pressing her nose against Emma's cheek, a gesture that said, "I'm here. You're safe." Sarah continued, her voice gentle but persistent. "It's okay to be scared, but that bad man needs to answer for what he did, and you're the only one who can tell everyone what really happened." Emma's breathing quickened. Her hand gripped Bailey's fur tightly. For a moment, Sarah thought she'd pushed too far, that Emma would shut down completely. But then Emma opened her mouth. Her lips formed words. No sound came out, but Sarah could read them. "I'm scared." "I know, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, her own eyes stinging. "But you won't be alone. Bailey will be right there with you, the whole time, I promise." Emma looked at Bailey. The dog gazed back with such steady confidence, such unwavering support, that even Sarah felt braver. Emma's mouth moved again, still silent. "Okay." Sarah and Jennifer exchanged looks of desperate hope. 3 days. They had 3 days to turn mouthed words into actual testimony. 3 days for a miracle. As they left that evening, Emma paused at the door and looked back at Bailey. The dog stood and walked over, sitting directly in front of the little girl. Emma wrapped her arms around Bailey's neck and buried her face in soft fur. And then, so quietly Jennifer almost missed it, Emma whispered 2 words. "Good dog." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Jennifer gasped. Bailey's tail wagged slowly, majestically. Emma Richardson had spoken. Now they just needed her to do it again, in a courtroom under oath, with her attacker staring at her. The real test was 3 days away. September 20th, 2023, trial day. The morning arrived with cruel brightness. Sunlight streamed through Jennifer Richardson's kitchen window as if mocking the darkness of what lay ahead. Emma sat at the breakfast table, untouched cereal growing soggy in her bowl, her small hands fidgeting with the edge of her purple dress, the one she'd picked out specifically because Bailey's collar was purple. "Bailey will be there," Jennifer reminded her daughter for the 100th time, her own voice shaking despite efforts to sound confident. "The whole time, baby. She won't leave you." Emma nodded, but her eyes held the hollow look Jennifer had learned to dread. The little girl who'd whispered "good dog" 3 days ago had retreated back into silence. Not complete silence. She'd spoken a handful of words to Bailey during their prep sessions, but nothing consistent, nothing strong enough to sustain testimony. Jennifer's phone buzzed. "Sarah Martinez, we're ready when you are." Judge allowed extra time for Emma's comfort. No rush. No rush. As if time wasn't a guillotine blade hanging over all their heads. The Multnomah County Courthouse loomed like a fortress of marble and glass. Emma's hand clutched her mother's with crushing intensity as they walked through security. Every echo of footsteps, every official-looking person in a suit, every stern face made the little girl shrink smaller. Then they turned a corner, and there was Bailey. The German Shepherd sat in perfect formation beside Detective Martinez, but the moment she saw Emma, her tail began a slow, steady wag. Sarah had put a fresh purple bandana around Bailey's neck, matching Emma's dress. The little girl noticed immediately, and something flickered in her eyes. Connection. "Hey, Emma," Sarah said softly, crouching down. "Bailey got dressed up for you. She wanted to match." Emma walked forward slowly and pressed her face into Bailey's fur, breathing in the familiar comfort. The dog remained statue, still except for that gentle tail wag, radiating calm in the chaos. "Remember what we practiced," Sarah whispered. "Bailey will be right at your feet. You can touch her whenever you need to, and if you need a break, just tell the judge. She's very nice and she understands." Emma nodded against Bailey's neck, but didn't lift her head. District Attorney Michael Chen approached, his usually stern features softened with concern. "Emma, sweetheart, I'm going to ask you some questions in there. Simple ones. Just tell the truth about what you saw. That's all. Can you do that?" Emma's silence was his only answer. Chen exchanged a worried glance with Sarah. They discussed this possibility, that Emma might freeze completely. Plan B was to play her video-recorded statement from the prep sessions, but it was weak evidence compared to live testimony. Defense attorneys could tear apart a child's recorded words. They needed Emma to speak in real time, under oath. Judge Patricia Morrison's courtroom had been specially prepared. The usual stern arrangement was softened. A small witness chair with a booster seat, positioned so Emma wouldn't have to face Marcus Thompson directly. The judge had cleared the gallery except for essential personnel. Even the court reporter had been asked to type as quietly as possible. But despite all the accommodations, the room still felt massive, official, and terrifying. Emma's footsteps echoed as Sarah led her inside, Bailey walking calmly at her left side. Jennifer took a seat behind the prosecutor's table, tissues already clutched in her hand. Marcus Thompson sat with his defense attorney, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes tracked Emma's every movement. Judge Morrison smiled warmly from the bench. "Hello, Emma. I'm Judge Morrison, but you can call me Judge Patricia if that's easier. Is this your special friend?" Emma nodded, her hand already buried in Bailey's fur. What a beautiful dog. What's her name? Bailey, Emma whispered, so quietly that the court reporter leaned forward, unsure if she'd actually heard it. But it was a word, a start. Sarah helped Emma into the witness chair while Bailey positioned herself at the little girl's feet, close enough to touch, far enough not to crowd. The courtroom felt like it was holding its breath. Judge Morrison spoke in the gentlest voice a judge had ever used. Emma, Mr. Chen is going to ask you some questions now. You just answer as best as you can, okay? There's no wrong answer. Just tell the truth about what you remember. Michael Chen stood, keeping distance so as not to loom over the child. His voice was soft, almost conversational. Emma, do you remember the night of August 15th? It was a Tuesday evening. Silence. Emma stared at her lap where her hands twisted together. You were in your bedroom, weren't you? A tiny nod. Can you say yes out loud, sweetie? The judge needs to hear you. Emma's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. Sarah felt her heart sinking. Bailey sensed the tension and lifted her head slightly, looking up at Emma with those knowing eyes. Chen tried again, his tone patient. What were you doing in your bedroom that night? More silence. Thompson's defense attorney began to look hopeful. Did you look out your window? Emma's breathing quickened. Her small chest rose and fell rapidly, warning signs. She was shutting down. Emma, it's okay, Chen said quickly. Take your time, there's no. I saw. The words escaped like a gasp, barely audible. The entire courtroom froze. Every person leaned forward infinitesimally. Chen's eyes widened, but he kept his voice steady. You saw something out your window. Emma's hand dropped from her lap, her fingers finding Bailey's soft head. The dog remained perfectly still, a furry anchor in the storm. What did you see, Emma? Seconds ticked by, 10, 15, 20. Each one felt like an eternity. Then Emma's voice emerged again, stronger this time, though still trembling. I saw Ms. Lisa. You saw Ms. Lisa Chen? Yes. A tear rolled down Emma's cheek, but she kept going. She was outside. What was Ms. Lisa doing? Emma's hand gripped Bailey's fur tighter. The dog could feel the trembling, could sense the little girl teetering on the edge of either breaking through or breaking down. A man, Emma's voice cracked. A man was there. Can you tell me about the man? This was it, the critical moment. Emma needed to describe Thompson, needed to identify him, needed to tell what happened. But her voice was failing, her breath coming in short gasps. Chen gentled his voice even more. Emma, was the man being nice to Ms. Lisa? No, this came out stronger, tinged with something fierce. No, he was. Take your time, sweetheart. Emma looked down at Bailey. The dog gazed back with such steady confidence, such absolute trust, that something shifted in the little girl's expression. She drew a shaky breath, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and lifted her eyes to look directly at Michael Chen. When she spoke again, her voice carried through the courtroom with startling clarity. The bad man. Those 3 words landed like thunder. Jennifer's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Judge Morrison leaned forward with intense focus. And Bailey, beautiful, intuitive Bailey, was about to do something extraordinary. The German shepherd's entire body went rigid. Her ears pricked forward. Her head lifted sharply and her eyes locked onto Emma's face with laser focus. Something was happening. Bailey could sense it. The child was about to break fully through the wall of silence. But first, Bailey needed to show Emma she wasn't alone. What happened next would be talked about in that courthouse for years to come. Time fractured into crystallized moments. The words, "the bad man," hung in the air of Judge Morrison's courtroom like a flare shot into darkness. Emma Richardson's small voice had cracked through 6 months of silence, and everyone present felt the weight of that breakthrough. But what happened in the next 3 seconds would transform this from a simple testimony into something that people would remember for the rest of their lives. Emma's voice wavered. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. Her small body began to shake as the reality of speaking, of accessing those terrible memories, crashed over her like a wave. She was 3 years old, sitting in a courtroom about to relive her nightmare. The walls were closing in. Her breath came in rapid, shallow gasps. She was breaking. And Bailey knew it. The German Shepherd's reaction was instantaneous, primal, and devastating in its beauty. Bailey moved. Not with the careful, measured movements of a trained facility dog following protocol. This was something deeper, something that transcended training. This was pure instinct, the ancient bond between human and canine expressing itself in its most powerful form. In one fluid motion, Bailey rose from her lying position and lifted her massive head. But she didn't just look at Emma. She moved with purpose, with urgency, with an understanding that seemed to defy the limits of canine cognition. Bailey placed her chin directly on Emma's small lap. The weight was substantial but gentle, maybe 10 pounds of solid dog head resting on 3-year-old legs. Bailey's soft muzzle pressed against Emma's purple dress, and the dog's deep brown eyes tilted upward, locking onto the child's face with an intensity that made Sarah Martinez's breath catch in her throat. It wasn't just eye contact, it was communication. Bailey's eyes seemed to say everything Emma needed to hear. I see you. I feel your fear. You are not alone. I am here. I will not leave. You are safe with me. You can do this. The courtroom had gone absolutely silent. Even the court reporter's fingers had stilled on her stenography machine. Judge Morrison's mouth hung slightly open. Michael Chen stood frozen mid-gesture. Jennifer Richardson wept openly, her hand pressed against her heart. Marcus Thompson's smirk had vanished entirely. Emma looked down at Bailey's upturned face. Tears streamed down the little girl's cheeks, dripping onto Bailey's fur, but the dog didn't flinch. She maintained that unwavering eye contact, her presence radiating something that adults would later struggle to put into words. Love, protection, courage, faith. Whatever it was, Emma felt it. The little girl's trembling hand lifted from where it had been clenched in her lap. Her small fingers found Bailey's soft ear, the one that flopped slightly to the side. Emma stroked it slowly, mechanically at first, then with more purpose. The familiar texture seemed to ground her, pulling her back from the edge of panic. Bailey's tail moved, not the happy helicopter wag of play, but a slow, deliberate sweep across the floor. Once, twice, a metronome of steadiness in the chaos. Emma drew a shaky breath, then another. Her breathing began to slow, matching Bailey's calm, steady rhythm. Sarah watched in awe. She'd worked with Bailey for 5 years, had seen the dog comfort dozens of traumatized children, but this was different. This was Bailey operating on a level Sarah hadn't known existed. The connection between dog and child was so profound it felt almost spiritual. Emma, Michael Chen's voice was barely a whisper, afraid to break the spell. Can you tell us more about the bad man? Emma's eyes never left Bailey's. The dog continued to gaze up at her with such steady confidence, such absolute trust, that something cracked open inside the little girl's chest, something that had been locked tight since that terrible August night. When Emma spoke again, her voice was clearer, stronger. The words came slowly, but they came. He was hurting Ms. Lisa. Emma's fingers continued stroking Bailey's ear, drawing strength from the connection. He was so mean. What was he doing to Ms. Lisa? Chen asked gently. Emma's hand gripped Bailey's ear tighter. The dog didn't flinch, didn't pull away. If anything, she pressed her chin more firmly into Emma's lap, taking the weight of the child's fear onto herself. Hitting, Emma's voice cracked but held. He hit her really hard, she fell down. Jennifer's sob echoed from behind the prosecutor's table, but Emma didn't look away from Bailey. The dog had become her entire world, her anchor, her courage made manifest in fur and devotion. Then what happened, Emma? He kicked her, and then... Emma paused, her breathing quickening again. Bailey sensed the spike in anxiety immediately. The dog shifted, pressing not just her chin but the side of her face against Emma's stomach, surrounding the child with warmth and protection. Emma's hand moved from Bailey's ear to rest on top of the dog's head. Then he got the stick, the big stick. A baseball bat, Chen clarified carefully. Yes, a bat. He hit Ms. Lisa with it. Tears flowed freely now, but Emma kept talking. She was crying, she was so hurt, and he was so mean, so mean. Bailey's eyes never wavered. Even as Emma's tears fell onto her fur, even as the little girl's voice broke with remembered horror, Bailey maintained that rock-solid presence. Her message was clear. Keep going. I'm here. You're doing so well. I've got you. Emma, Chen said, his own voice thick with emotion. Do you see the man who hurt Ms. Lisa? Is he in this courtroom right now? This was the moment. The identification. The piece of testimony that would seal Marcus Thompson's fate or set him free. Emma's hand stilled on Bailey's head. Her breathing hitched. For 3 terrible seconds, Sarah thought they'd lost her again, that the fear would win, that Emma would retreat back into silence. But then Bailey did something extraordinary. The German Shepherd, still resting her chin on Emma's lap, made a soft sound, not quite a whine, not quite a huff. It was a vocalization of encouragement, of support, a sound that seemed to say, I believe in you. Emma heard it, felt it, and found her courage. The little girl lifted her eyes from Bailey's face for the first time since the dog had moved. She looked across the courtroom, her gaze sweeping past her mother, past the judge, past the lawyers, until it landed on Marcus Thompson. Thompson stared back, his face carefully neutral, but Emma saw through it. She recognized those eyes, the same eyes that had looked up at her window 6 months ago, filled with rage and violence. Emma's hand pressed down on Bailey's head, drawing strength from the solid presence beneath her palm. When she spoke, her voice rang out with a clarity that shocked everyone in the room. That's him. Emma pointed with her free hand, her finger steady and sure. That's the bad man who hurt Ms. Lisa, that one right there. The courtroom erupted in barely contained emotion. Jennifer collapsed in her seat, overcome. Judge Morrison blinked back tears. Even the defense attorney looked shaken. But Sarah Martinez only had eyes for Bailey. The German Shepherd maintained her position, chin on Emma's lap, eyes still locked on the little girl's face. And in that moment, Sarah understood something profound. This wasn't just a trained courthouse facility dog doing her job. This was a guardian, a protector, a miracle worker in fur. Bailey had done more than help Emma testify. She had given a broken child her voice back. She had shown a terrified toddler what true courage looked like. She had proven that sometimes, the most powerful form of support doesn't come with words at all. It comes with presence, with unwavering devotion, with the simple act of being there when someone needs you most. Emma Richardson had found her voice. And Bailey, remarkable, intuitive, extraordinary Bailey, had been the key that unlocked it. The identification hung in the air like a verdict already rendered. Emma Richardson's small finger pointed directly at Marcus Thompson, unwavering despite the tears streaming down her face. Her other hand remained firmly planted on Bailey's head, the German Shepherd's steady presence her lifeline in the storm. District Attorney Michael Chen felt a surge of both triumph and tenderness. They had their identification, but pushing further felt cruel. Emma had already given so much, broken through so many walls. Could he really ask a 3-year-old for more? He had to. Justice demanded it. Emma, Chen said softly, approaching but still maintaining respectful distance, you're doing so wonderfully, so brave. Can you tell us what happened after the bad man hit Ms. Lisa with the bat? Emma's breathing quickened again. Her fingers curled tighter into Bailey's fur. The dog sensed the spike in anxiety immediately and adjusted her position, pressing her massive head more firmly into Emma's lap, creating a weighted warmth that grounded the child. She stopped moving, Emma whispered, her voice small but steady. Ms. Lisa was on the ground and she wasn't getting up. What did the man do then? Emma's eyes squeezed shut. The memories were flooding back now, vivid, terrible, unavoidable. He looked around. He was breathing really hard. Like this, Emma demonstrated with quick, harsh breaths. Sarah Martinez watched from her position near the witness stand, marveling at the child's resilience. Emma was describing complex observations, processing details that most adults would miss in moments of trauma. The little girl's mind had recorded everything, even as it had locked those memories away behind walls of silence. Then what happened, sweetheart? Chen's voice remained gentle, coaxing. He looked up. Emma's eyes opened, finding Bailey's gaze again. The dog stared back with such intensity, such faith. He looked right at me, at my window. A chill ran through the courtroom. This was the moment, the instant when Marcus Thompson realized he'd been witnessed, when a violent criminal's eyes met those of a 3-year-old child. What did you feel when he looked at you? Chen asked. Scared. The word came out as a whisper. So scared. His face was angry, mean, like. Emma struggled for words that could capture adult rage in a toddler's vocabulary, like monsters in bad dreams, but real. Jennifer Richardson's quiet sobbing provided a heartbreaking soundtrack to her daughter's testimony. Judge Morrison dabbed at her own eyes with a tissue, no longer bothering to hide her emotion. What happened after he looked at you? Chen continued. He got in his car, the blue one, and he left really fast. The car made loud sounds. Emma's hand moved from Bailey's head to the dog's soft ear again, that familiar texture providing comfort. And Ms. Lisa was still on the ground, not moving. What did you do then, Emma? I called for Mama. Emma's voice broke. I called and she came running, and then I couldn't talk anymore. The words stopped coming out. Bailey shifted again, this time lifting her head slightly to press her cold nose against Emma's hand, a gentle reminder that she was there, that Emma wasn't alone in reliving these memories. The touch worked like magic. Emma steadied, drew another breath, and continued unprompted. I wanted to tell the police. I wanted to help Ms. Lisa, but my voice was stuck, like it was locked in a box in my throat and I couldn't open it. She looked down at Bailey with such gratitude, but Bailey helped me find the key. The courtroom remained absolutely silent. Even Marcus Thompson's defense attorney, Richard Feldman, sat motionless, his usual objections dying unspoken. There was no cross-examination strategy that could undermine this testimony, not when delivered with such raw, childlike honesty, not when supported by such visible trauma and courage. Chen pressed on, knowing he needed to establish one more critical element. Emma, before that night, had you ever seen the bad man before? No, never. Are you very sure that the man sitting over there, Chen gestured toward Thompson, is the same man who hurt Ms. Lisa? Emma's gaze swung back to Thompson. The convicted man stared back, and for a moment their eyes locked again, predator and witness, violence and innocence. But this time, Emma didn't look away. This time she had Bailey's solid warmth beneath her hand and her mother's love behind her and her own hard-won courage inside her. Yes, Emma said clearly. That's him, I'm sure. He has the same mean eyes. Thompson's jaw clenched. His attorney placed a warning hand on his arm. Thank you, Emma, Chen said, his voice thick with emotion. You've been so incredibly brave, so helpful. He turned to Judge Morrison. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Morrison looked toward the defense table. Mr. Feldman, do you wish to cross-examine? Richard Feldman stood slowly. He glanced at his client, then at Emma, a tiny girl in a purple dress with a giant dog resting her head in her lap, tears still wet on her cheeks but eyes bright with hard-won strength. The defense attorney had built his career on aggressive cross-examination, on finding weaknesses in testimony, on protecting his clients at all costs. But he was also a father of 3, and the idea of interrogating this traumatized child, of trying to poke holes in testimony that had clearly cost her everything to give, made his stomach turn. "No, Your Honor," Feldman said quietly. "No cross-examination." A collective exhale swept through the courtroom. Chen looked surprised but relieved. Sarah felt tears finally escape down her own cheeks. Jennifer Richardson collapsed forward, her forehead pressing against the railing in front of her. Judge Morrison's voice was gentle but carried the weight of judicial authority. "Emma Richardson, I want you to know something very important. What you did here today took more courage than most adults ever have to show. You witnessed something terrible, something no child should ever see, and it hurt you deeply. But today, you found your voice again. You told the truth. And because of you, justice can be served." The judge paused, her own voice wavering with emotion. "Ms. Lisa, Ms. Chen is going to be okay, in large part because you were brave enough to speak up for her. You should be very, very proud of yourself." Emma nodded solemnly, processing the judge's words with that peculiar wisdom that traumatized children often develop. Judge Morrison smiled through her tears. "And Bailey," the judge looked directly at the German shepherd, who lifted her head at the sound of her name, "you are a very good dog, a hero dog." Bailey's tail wagged twice, in acknowledgement. "You may step down, Emma," Judge Morrison said gently. Sarah approached the witness stand to help Emma down, but the little girl paused. She wrapped both arms around Bailey's neck, buried her face in soft fur, and whispered something only the dog could hear. Bailey's tail wagged more vigorously, the first truly happy wag since the testimony began. When Emma finally released her grip, Sarah saw something in the child's face that hadn't been there before. Not just relief, not just exhaustion, but something like peace. The wound was still there, still raw, but the infection of silence had been cleansed. Emma had testified. She had faced her nightmare. She had pointed at her monster and named him. And she had done it all with Bailey by her side. As Emma climbed down from the witness stand, Jennifer rushed forward to scoop her daughter into her arms. Mother and child clung to each other, both crying, both shaking, both transformed by what had just occurred. Sarah stood beside Bailey, her hand resting on the dog's head, and watched the Richardson women hold each other. The German shepherd sat at attention, her work complete, her purpose fulfilled. In that moment, Sarah understood something she'd always suspected but never fully grasped. Some bonds transcend species, transcend training, transcend explanation. The bond between Bailey and Emma wasn't about commands or protocols or courthouse procedures. It was about one soul recognizing another's pain and saying, without words, "I will carry this with you. You are not alone." Marcus Thompson would be convicted, justice would be served, but the real victory was smaller and more profound. Emma Richardson had found her voice again. And Bailey, remarkable, extraordinary, heroic Bailey, had shown her the way. 3 months after Emma Richardson's testimony, Marcus Thompson sat in a county jail cell, convicted on charges of aggravated assault, witness intimidation, and a host of other crimes that would keep him behind bars for the next 15 years. The jury had deliberated for less than 2 hours. Emma's testimony, combined with physical evidence and medical reports, had been overwhelming. But for Emma, the real trial had just begun, the trial of learning to live again. The nightmares came first. 2 weeks after her courtroom testimony, Emma started waking up screaming, her small body drenched in sweat, crying for Bailey. Jennifer would hold her daughter through the dark hours, whispering reassurances that the bad man was locked away, that he couldn't hurt anyone anymore. But words weren't enough. Emma needed Bailey. Dr. Patricia Howland, the child psychologist who'd worked with Emma before the trial, recommended continued sessions with the courthouse facility dog. Emma formed a profound attachment, Dr. Howland explained to Sarah Martinez during a consultation. Bailey represents safety to her, a bridge between her trauma and her healing. We need to maintain that connection, at least for a while. Sarah agreed immediately. Bailey seemed to understand too. Whenever Emma arrived at the station for their therapy sessions, the German Shepherd would rise to her feet with that distinctive tail wag reserved only for special people. Emma would run to her, arms outstretched, and bury her face in familiar fur. The sessions evolved. No longer focused on testimony or court preparation, they became about processing, healing, and rediscovering joy. Sarah brought art supplies, and Emma would draw while sitting against Bailey's side. The pictures told their own story, dark, chaotic scribbles at first, gradually giving way to recognizable shapes, then to scenes of happiness. Flowers, rainbows, and always, a big dog with a purple collar. "Tell me about your picture," Sarah would prompt gently. And Emma would talk, haltingly at first, then with increasing confidence. She talked about the scary night. She talked about feeling locked inside herself. She talked about how Bailey's eyes made her feel brave. "Bailey has magic," Emma declared one afternoon, her 4-year-old vocabulary expanding daily. "She can see when people are sad inside, even when they don't show it on the outside." Sarah smiled, stroking Bailey's head. "You know what, Emma, I think you're absolutely right." By month 2, something remarkable was happening. Emma wasn't just recovering, she was thriving. Her selective mutism had lifted completely. She chattered constantly at home, telling her mother elaborate stories about princesses and dragons and brave dogs who saved kingdoms. She sang again, that same off-key enthusiasm that Jennifer had missed so desperately. Preschool teachers reported that Emma was engaging with other children, playing, laughing, participating. The haunted look had faded from her eyes, replaced by the natural sparkle of childhood curiosity. "It's like watching someone come back to life," Jennifer told Sarah during one of their check-ins. "I have my daughter back, really back." But Emma's story was having an impact far beyond one little girl's healing. The case of State v. Marcus Thompson became a landmark in Oregon's legal system. News outlets picked up the story, not sensationalizing Emma's trauma, but highlighting the courthouse facility dog program and its profound effectiveness. Bailey's photo appeared in newspapers across the state, that noble German Shepherd face becoming synonymous with justice, compassion, and healing. Governor Tina Kotek took notice. In December, she signed a bill allocating significant funding to expand courthouse facility dog programs throughout Oregon. The legislation was named Emma's Law in honor of the brave little girl who'd shown what was possible when trauma-informed support met traditional justice. Sarah received calls from courthouses in California, Washington, Idaho, and beyond. Everyone wanted to know, how do you train a dog like Bailey? How do you implement the program? Can you share your protocols? Bailey became something of a celebrity, though she handled fame with the same calm dignity she brought to everything. She continued her work at the Portland courthouse, helping other children find their voices, always patient, always present, always knowing exactly what each child needed. But Emma remained special to her. Sarah could see it in the way Bailey's entire demeanor shifted when Emma walked into a room, a brightness, an eagerness that she didn't show with other children. 6 months after the trial, on a crisp March afternoon, Jennifer brought Emma to the police station for what everyone knew would be their final official session. Emma was doing wonderfully. Her therapy with Dr. Howland had progressed to the point where the courthouse dog sessions were no longer necessary. It was time to say goodbye. Emma knew. She'd been preparing for weeks, talking about it with her mother, making a special gift for Bailey. A drawing of the two of them with a rainbow overhead and the words, "Thank you, Bailey," written in careful preschool letters. When Emma entered the familiar room, Bailey was waiting on her favorite blue blanket. The little girl, now 4 years old and so much more confident than the silent, traumatized toddler of 6 months ago, walked directly to the dog and knelt down. "Hi, Bailey," Emma said clearly, her voice strong and sure. "I brought you something." She presented the drawing. Sarah took it, her throat tight, knowing this piece of art would be framed and hung in her office forever. Emma wrapped her arms around Bailey's neck, and the dog pressed close, her chin resting on Emma's shoulder. They stayed like that for a long moment, girl and dog, survivor and guardian, two souls who'd shared an extraordinary journey. "You know what, Bailey?" Emma whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm not scared anymore. Well, sometimes I still get a little scared. But then I remember you, and I remember I was brave once, so I can be brave again." Bailey's tail wagged slowly, majestically. If dogs could smile, Sarah thought, Bailey would be beaming with pride. Emma pulled back, holding Bailey's face in her small hands. "You have to help other kids now, okay? Kids who are scared like I was. You have to show them how to be brave." Bailey licked Emma's nose, and the little girl giggled. A sound so pure, so joyful, that Sarah felt tears streaming freely down her face. "I'll come visit sometimes," Emma promised. "Mama says we can, and I'll tell all my friends about you, about how you're the bravest, bestest dog in the whole world." The goodbye was bittersweet but beautiful. Emma hugged Bailey one final time, kissed the top of her fuzzy head, and then stood up. She took her mother's hand and walked toward the door with her head held high. At the threshold, Emma paused and looked back. Bailey sat at attention, watching her with those deep, knowing eyes. "Thank you for helping me find my voice again," Emma said, her 4-year-old wisdom carrying the weight of everything they'd been through together. Bailey's tail swept across the floor, one final wag of acknowledgement. And then Emma was gone, walking out into her future, a future filled with possibilities, with healing, with the knowledge that she had faced her nightmare and survived. Sarah knelt beside Bailey, wrapping her arms around the German shepherd who'd given so much, helped so many, and asked for nothing in return but the chance to serve. "You did good, girl," Sarah whispered into soft fur. "You gave her everything she needed. You were her miracle." Bailey leaned into the embrace, content in the way only a dog who knows her purpose can be. Over the following years, Emma Richardson would grow up strong and confident. She'd become an advocate for child witnesses, eventually studying psychology with plans to help other trauma survivors. She'd speak at conferences about her experience, always with Bailey's framed photograph beside her on the podium. And she'd never forget the German shepherd who taught her that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it, one small step at a time, with someone steady by your side. Bailey continued her work for 3 more years before retiring at age 8. She helped 47 more children find their voices in courtrooms across Portland. But ask anyone who worked with her, and they'd tell you, Emma Richardson was special. Emma was the case that proved what courthouse facility dogs could truly accomplish. On Bailey's final day of service, a package arrived at the police station. Inside was a photo of Emma, now 7 years old, smiling brightly, holding a sign that read, "Thank you, Bailey, for showing me I could be brave." Sarah hung it next to the preschool drawing in her office, a testament to one extraordinary dog and one courageous little girl who'd saved each other in the ways that mattered most. Justice had been served that day in court. But more importantly, a child had been healed. And that, Sarah thought, was the real victory. The end.